At E3 2009, Nintendo would show everybody a trailer for a new 3D Metroid game. This game was not developed by Retro Studios. They were busy working on another project. Retro needed a break from the series after making 3 masterpieces in a row. This new game was being made by Team Ninja, a team known for making 3D action games. And from the tiny bits of gameplay they showed, it definitely was a more action-focused Metroid game. Other than the gameplay, it looked like this game was going to be about Samus's backstory, specifically her time being trained by the Galactic Federation. A game that shows us more of Samus's past sounds like a great idea. Most of the games never really focused on that, and if they did say something about it, it was usually about the Chozo. Most of Samus's backstory was from supplementary material, like the Zero Mission manga. But as cool as it sounded to have a Metroid game focus on Samus's past, and have a game made by Team Ninja, even before I bought this game, even before I was a fan of the series, I knew that this game was one of the most infamous games in the series, and one of the most infamous Nintendo games. While most mainstream reviewers were pretty kind to this game, the fan base, from what I saw on the internet at the time, was furious, for lots of reasons. But one of the reasons why this game got so much hate was because some thought this game killed the series. Of course, with hindsight, we know this didn't happen, but this game did put the series in its second dark age. We went from getting a bunch of Metroid games during the 2000s, then when Other M released, there wasn't a new game until 2016. And when we got one, Samus wasn't even in it. But nowadays, when people talk about Other M, it's usually not as negatively. There are still people who don't like this game, but I guess the fans just don't see a reason to hate on this game now that Metroid is back and in a great place. And I think that's one of the reasons why I never hated this game. By the time I became a fan and played this game, Samus had already returned, and then eventually Dread was announced. I became a fan at the perfect time. The other reason why is because I already heard so many things about this game before I played it. Like I said, Other M is pretty infamous. Even though I wasn't a fan at the time, I saw so many reviews and videos of fans talking about this game. I heard people talk about how stupid the plot is, and how apparently Adam Malkovich is the worst character in the series. And when I finally played the game for myself, yeah, I agreed with those opinions. Metroid Other M was my least favorite game in the series, and even though I only played this game once, I know my opinion on the story isn't going to change with this replay. The story is the most infamous thing about this game, and it's a part of the game that most people discuss when they're talking about why they don't like it. But maybe I'll find something about the gameplay that I enjoy. On my first playthrough, I was so focused on the story because I wanted to see if it was as bad as everyone said it was. Because of that, I don't remember much of the gameplay. I like action games, and even though I've never played any other Team Ninja game, I've heard good things about other games they've made. I'm hoping at the very least I enjoy that part of the game. So even though the trailers showed cutscenes about Samus's past, this game actually takes place not long after Super Metroid. And man, seeing the end of Super Metroid like this is still cool. But this isn't just a flashback, Samus was dreaming about it, because apparently Samus really cared about the Metroid larva from SR388 in Metroid 2. And this game will make sure you know that she cared about the baby. After the tutorial, Samus goes on her mission. There was a distress call from a research station called the Bottle Ship. When Samus gets there, she runs into a group of Galactic Federation soldiers. They're here for the same reason she is, and they're being led by Adam Malkovich, Samus's old commanding officer from when she was a part of the Federation. Adam lets Samus help them, but she has to take orders from him during this mission. He also says that she can't use any of her suit abilities unless he authorizes it. I remember not liking this during my first playthrough. Obviously, this game wasn't going to let us play through the entire game with a fully powered suit. But knowing that I already have the abilities, but just can't use them because Adam hasn't given me permission, it immediately made me not like Adam. Another reason why I don't like Adam in this game is because of the few times where he doesn't immediately authorize something when he sees that Samus needs it. Like when you have to go through a bunch of rooms with lava and Samus takes damage while in them. Adam only authorizes the use of the Varia suit once you get to the boss of the area. Or like when I got to this room, I saw that I needed the wave beam to continue, so I backtracked to find a different route. Then I got locked into a box and couldn't shoot the enemies on the other side. And after dodging their attacks for a while, Adam finally lets me use the wave beam. So after I defeated the enemies, I had to go all the way back so I could progress. Stuff like that doesn't happen that often, but the few times where it does happen is pretty annoying. Adam telling Samus what to do, and limiting what abilities she can use, would already make fans not like him. But then there's the scene where he sacrifices himself. It's supposed to be this emotional scene, but it doesn't work because this game did such a horrible job at trying to make us care about him. Like right before he sacrifices himself, he shot Samus in front of an attacking Metroid. Why? Yeah, she froze when she saw it because it reminded her of the baby, but Samus is still safer when she's in the suit. And this doesn't really have anything to do with Adam. But you're telling me one blast from Adam's freeze gun knocks Samus out, but this doesn't. Other than the sacrifice scene, these two don't really talk to each other outside of Adam giving Samus orders. So I found it really hard to care about Adam. Other than that, the rest of the plot is nothing. There's a traitor in Adam's group who starts taking out his men. But kinda like Adam, this game didn't make me care about them either. Anthony is the only one I remember. There's also MB, an AI that was made to think like Mother Brain. On my first playthrough, I was actually pretty interested in this, but sadly it doesn't really go anywhere. She doesn't even get a proper boss fight. Just this part where you're stuck in first person and have to try and lock onto her. So yeah, I still don't like the story. There's a lot of great ideas here, but none of them feel fleshed out. Or, in the case of Adam and the other soldiers, I think we needed to see them interact with Samus more, so we can actually care about them. But even if a game has a bad story, I can usually just ignore it if the gameplay is fun. And like I said earlier, I went into this hoping I'd like the gameplay. Even though Other M is an action game, they still tried to put some elements from the other games in this one. Samus still has to find energy tanks and missile expansions. Just like Super Metroid onwards, the map shows you what rooms have items in them, but it doesn't show you how to obtain them. Although in this game, you have to defeat all the enemies in a room before it shows up. Most of the items are pretty easy to find, specifically missile expansions, but to be fair, in most Metroid games, missile expansions are easy to find. I just thought they were even easier to find in this game. There were some that were hidden fairly well though, and were satisfying to find. Mainly the items that required one of Samus's upgrades to get. The ones that made me use the speed booster were my favorites. That's probably because that's my favorite upgrade in the series. For me, the most rewarding items to collect in a Metroid game are the main power-ups. But like I said earlier, Samus already has all of them in this game. One of my favorite things in this series was beating a boss and being rewarded with a new power-up. I prefer that over how it is in Other M, even if the excuses for Samus losing her upgrades can be kinda stupid sometimes. The main reason why I think items are easy to find, and also why exploration in general isn't as enjoyable in this game, is because almost every room in this game is a straight hallway, even when you're in one of the areas that's supposed to be replicating a certain biome. There are usually only 2 exits, and if the area is more open, that usually means there's going to be a mini-boss there. I guess you could argue that the bottle ship is man-made, so of course the rooms are just hallways. And I guess, but I thought Fusion did a good job at making each area on the BSL feel like a Metroid map, but also a place made by people. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this game is really similar to Fusion. A research lab that is replicating different biomes and separates them with elevators. I guess Prime borrowed its beats from Super, so I'm okay with it here. I'm just surprised I never noticed it until now. Anyway, like I said earlier, this game wasn't trying to be a traditional Metroid game. It was trying to be an action game with a slight focus on exploration. And as an action game, I think this game is just alright. Every problem I have with Other M's gameplay was caused due to one decision made by the game's director, Yoshio Sakamoto. Sakamoto wanted this game to be played with the Wii Remote, and only the Wii Remote, no nunchuck. And you can't plug in a GameCube controller or a classic controller either. While some games work fine when being played like this, a 3D action game usually needs more than 2 or 3 buttons. That being said, I think Team Ninja did the best with what they had. Combat works in this game, and when watching gameplay, it looks fine. It's just kinda boring to play. Samus has a few ways of attacking. Beams, missiles, and I guess bombs. I don't know why you'd want to use the bombs during a normal fight, but you can. I only used them on enemies that were in sections made for the Morph Ball. You can also use the screw attack once it's authorized, and it's definitely the best way to take care of enemies at the end of the game. While missiles are just as strong as they always are, especially when you're allowed to use super missiles, I didn't use them unless I absolutely needed to. And that's because you can only shoot missiles in first-person mode. To go in first-person mode, you have to point the Wii Remote at the TV. So if there's a bunch of enemies in a room, you're better off just using the beams. You also get less missiles in this game compared to the other titles, and enemies don't drop missiles or even health pickups in this game. To refill your ammo, you have to point the Wii Remote up and hold A. If you do this when your health is low, you can restore your health a little bit. The beams are also the better choice because just like in the other games, you can charge your shot. But in this game, if you dodge an enemy and press the shoot button at the right time, Samus's arm cannon immediately charges. So I would always let the enemy attack me, then do the instant charge. I just said that you had to press it at the right time, but I'm pretty sure I pressed the button at different times and it still worked. The timing for this is not strict, so you can just spam it against enemies, and sometimes bosses. This move would have been more satisfying to use if the timing was stricter, like a parry move in other action games. I think another reason why I found the combat kind of boring was because even though there is a variety of enemy types, you can take most of them out the same way. Some require these finisher moves, which you can do when an enemy is stunned. I will admit, seeing all the animations for the different enemy types was cool. You can even do some of these moves during boss fights. Now that I mention them, the boss fights are easily when this game is at its best, in my opinion. I thought the boss fights were actually really enjoyable for the most part. The dodge or sense move wouldn't always work against them. I also thought some of their gimmicks were fun. Yeah, some of them are from other Metroid games, and they do exactly the same thing, but I think them being in 3D made them feel different. For example, one of my favorites was Nightmare, the first time you fight it. You need to time your jumps right to go over the lasers, and the timing changes due to the changing gravity. I also thought the fight with Ridley was good. The scene before the fight was stupid, Like, why is Samus freezing in front of Ridley? If this game was set before the first Metroid game, it would make more sense. But because this game takes place after Super, Samus has already defeated Ridley 2 or 3 times already. Whatever, I thought the fight itself was fun. The only boss fight I didn't enjoy was the Queen Metroid. You have to freeze the Metroids, then blow them up with missiles, which means you have to go in first person. The best strategy for this fight is to try and freeze them all near each other, then use the Seeker missiles so you can blow them all up at once. Also, during my first playthrough at the end of the fight, I remember I got a game over. I played Metroid 2 before this, so I thought you had to use bombs. But what you actually have to do is know that you can use power bombs now. The game does not tell you that you can use these. Samus doesn't say anything, and the menu doesn't even open like it does with every other power-up. I did get it on my second try, and I remembered for this playthrough, but I still think that's cheap. Earlier in the game, when Samus uses the space jump without Adam's permission, the game still opens the menu, so I don't know why it doesn't during this fight. I was originally going to say this game doesn't have a real final boss, but it actually does. For the first time in the series, I believe, this game doesn't end with the credits. Instead, there's an epilogue. I think this is mainly for 100% completion. This game is so linear and story-driven that this was pretty much the only way they could do this. But the real final boss is Phantoon. I don't know why he's here, but okay. Even though I have no idea why Phantoon is here, the fight is still good. But I wish MB had a real boss fight, and was the final boss. Since this game loves calling back to the previous Metroid games, even ones that take place later in the canon, maybe instead of bringing back a boss from Super, beating MB, if there was a real fight, could have started a self-destruct sequence. This game still has one, of course, and I do prefer how they do it. I'm just surprised they didn't take the chance to reference the first game or Super. Also, I'm not against callbacks or references. It's just usually this series does a good job at making the callbacks make sense in the story. But in this game, it felt like they would bring a boss back just so fans can point and say, "Hey, I remember him." Anyway, back to the ending. Samus is at the bottle ship right before it explodes, so she can get Adam's helmet. When she finds it, this game's escape sequence starts. For some reason, Samus doesn't put her suit back on, so all you can use during this part is Samus's taser pistol. It's kinda like the Chozodia part of Zero Mission. It doesn't really matter that we can't use anything, since there are only a few enemies. I just ignored them. Once you make it to the ship, the game ends. And that's Metroid Other M. I still don't hate this game. The story is a mess, but the gameplay is alright. On repeat playthroughs, you can skip the cutscenes, but if I'm in the mood to replay a Metroid game, this probably won't be the one I choose. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Other M. Metroid Prime 4 comes out later this year. I'm definitely going to make a video about that game when it comes out. I don't know if there's going to be another Metroid video until then. But anyway, thanks for watching.